Welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. My name is Ben. This podcast is about calling followers of Jesus to radical faith outside of the church. And ladies and gentlemen, my struggle is I don't know where to look. Do I look at the TV monitor that's showing David's beautiful face? Do I look directly at you to kind of create an emotional connection? What do I do, David? What do I do?
I already thought we had an emotional connection. Come
Like
on.
you and I? Well, hopefully.
Yes.
Hopefully
Yeah.
biology would have instilled that into us, at least.
I don't think we have to look at each other. In fact, I prefer if we don't. It makes me feel more calm.
Yeah, well, and actually, ironically, to look into the eyes of the audience, I also actually have to look into your eyes because otherwise I'm just kind of looking off to the distance, which I think makes me look more pensive, but
Yeah.
less sort of, in touch with the people, if you will.
Pensive isn't a bad thing, That's kind of what everyone wants these days is
It
pensive,
is.
don't they?
It is.
I mean,
As I said, this is the Provoke and Inspire podcast. We are down one member. We are just a duo now, a father-son
yeah.
rock and roll podcast combo. There's an acronym for that, but I ain't gonna try.
I know why Luke isn't here because I know a
As
lot
he's
of
not
people
here.
are wondering.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Edges of their seats collectively.
Well, he's really gotten into this standing on top of horses while they go around in circles kind of
Yes.
thing.
Equestrian balance competitions.
Is that what they call it?
They do. ECC.
So he told me they call it Roman riding, and he does it
Well, yeah. That's the sort of that's its original, more ancient term. Yes.
It's apparently Luke is Roman riding at a circus with Nigel.
That sounds awesome.
And he's on Nigel's horse. Boy, what a
Boy
detox!
Wonder?
No, boy, what a detox is the name of the horse.
What a detox!
And but apparently when he was on Boy What a Detox, Nigel's horse, it had a spasmodic colic issue. And so
colic. What did you
yeah.
go WebMD before
Colic,
this podcast?
Colic, sorry. Spasmodic
that
colic.
curl in his hair that he can't seem to comb out?
Hey, it's like 4 a.m. for me, dude, over here or something. So just
dude over here. Is that the name of your horse?
So anyway, because of this spasmodic colic,
throw a comma into your verbal,
it kind of propelled Luke into a nearby fence, and now he's in a neck brace, and Nigel's really irritated. So that's
for a
why
second there,
Luke
I thought you were going to say in a nectar bush, but it is the nectar bush that caused the neck brace that has put it's put Nigel in a foul mood, though you'd never know it because he'll never say it, like so much.
But the horse, his
horse,
boy, what a detox is just fine.
Yeah. As you can clearly tell from the beginning of this podcast, we are our whole purpose in doing this every week. Why we waketh ourselves out of bed. We shake off the cobwebs. We shower occasionally, and we get before you here, and we try to bring up topics that are relevant, that are provoking and inspiring, all in the name of how can we be radical followers of Jesus outside of the church. And we are fast approaching our 200th episode, which if I had the salute button, and David will inevitably be like, where's the salute button? I'll be like, I ain't got the salute button. He'll be like, why don't you have the salute button? I don't have it. But wow, 200 episodes, David. Reflect on that for a second. I actually think that's pretty cool. 200 episodes. That's no joke.
So why don't we have the salute button?
Man, come on.
What episode? Well, what episode is this?
One-man pony over here.
What episode is this?
I think this is 198, maybe 197. Yeah. I don't know. Counting is hard, but I think it's pretty cool. There's a lot of let's just put it this way. iTunes is littered with 4-episode podcasts. And so in this world of stops and starts, without trying to toot our own horn, I think it's pretty cool. And really we're continuing to do this because people are actually listening, at least we think. So we thank you for sticking it out with us. Some of you have been with us from the very beginning, and that is incredibly encouraging because obviously if no one listened, then we probably wouldn't do this. So thank you for supporting us. Would you continue to do so? And one of the ways that you can do that is by rating and reviewing this on iTunes. Daily, almost our ratings grow, and it's not just some random ego boost. It does actually improve the exposure of this podcast, gets it in front of more people. So please consider doing that. Right now, well, we're at about 154 ratings, and the most recent review that we had was on January 24th by well, the name of the person contributing said review is Everyday Nickname, so very sort of generic. But he or she writes, I love all the episodes about current events. Wow, I threw a lot of S's in there. I love all the episodes about current events. All of the hosts have a very godly perspective, which is refreshing and feels increasingly rare in today's age. So thank you so much for that review. That's very encouraging. And again, as we approach the 200th episode, it is very encouraging for those that have stuck with us, who have shared this, who have been there with us through thick and thin. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll just carry on. And pretty soon we'll hit 1,000 episodes, right, David?
So are we going to do some kind of special thing for the 200th?
I don't know yet. I don't know. Maybe we'll hire a mariachi band, a bunch of clowns, a barrel full of wheat, some trained kittens. We'll put on festive clothing. We'll get some salsa, and we'll see what happens.
We could do like a kind of a. I couldn't think of what to say.
So to give you an idea of what's coming up, if you've made it this far in the podcast, we have David's random story, 60 seconds to a minute and a half. Well, actually, we'd be lucky if it was that short, but it won't be. He enlightens us with some story that's either made up or true. Who knows? You decide. Fact or fiction, and it'll hopefully enlighten our days, and if nothing else, bring some levity. After that, we have a guest. We have none other than Scott Klusendorf. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with his name, he is the president of Life Training Institute. He trains people on the pro-life perspective, how to persuasively defend their view. He is the author of a book that actually introduced me to him. It's called The Case for Life, Equipping Christians to Engage the Culture. And this is a book that really opened my eyes in terms of sort of the rational defense of the pro-life perspective. And so we're going to talk to him about a lot of things. We have talked about the abortion topic a lot, though I don't think we should ever grow tired of talking about this critical subject. But we're going to try to approach it from a few different angles, including this idea that he brought up recently in an article about can we compromise on the way to progress? And so really what he means by that is a lot of Christians take an all or nothing approach. We either fix it all at once, we don't compromise on anything, we don't give any ground up. And he sort of argues how the flaw in this thinking really robs us of the progress that we should be striving to make, because any life is worth saving. And we have to take any ground that we can. So we're going to talk about that. David wants to bring up the whole tragedy of sex trafficking and how that relates to this. We're going to talk about the idea of, do we just focus on fetus life when we say pro-life, or should not followers of Jesus focus on all life? So it's going to be a great conversation. Scott is a brilliant, gifted communicator. I really believe you're going to enjoy this. So stick around, check that out. But now we have
David's random story.
So anyway, we used to have a guy work with us. His name's Sass, and he's from Australia. And
Sass, hey,
and he was like, he's like, wasn't he one of the top rugby players when he was in
he was, I mean, yes, he was a highly decorated young rugby player with an aspiring future, and he's incidentally quite hairy too.
What do you mean young? What do you mean decorated? I didn't see any decorations on him. I thought he was just a good.
He had some tassels and such. A hat,
no, he
whistle,
was
boots,
so
cape,
Sass was a good rugby player, but he didn't like. He had a thing about cats. He didn't like cats.
I don't remember that.
Huh?
I don't.
You remember that?
No, but carry on. Doesn't
matter. I don't know why.
So
he's afraid of cats, and we were on tour somewhere. I don't remember where. And so Steven, our guitarist, thought it'd be funny if we put a cat. There's like a cat hanging out behind the stage.
Where was I?
Huh?
When did this happen?
You were probably, I don't know what you were doing, man. But so Steven thought it'd be cool to put a cat in because Sass was setting up the PA, and so he thought it'd be funny to put the cat inside of a box, where the chords were. So Sass is like, and he's this really strong dude. Yeah. What do you mean, what?
Sure, this could have happened.
Yeah, it did happen. So Steven puts this cat in there and puts the lid on. And of course, the cat wasn't too excited about being in the flight case for some
for
reason.
those listening, we are pro animals and such.
So this cat's like in the flight case, and I don't think the flight case had any holes either in it. So
How
his
long
air,
was the cat in there?
well, a while, because Steven didn't know when he. Well,
That does
he didn't
not
know.
sound like Steve. Steve actually likes cats.
No, well, this is true. You can ask him. So
right,
finally he gets to the flight case, where he needed the gear in there. So the cat was really wanting some air at that point. So he opens the flight. He opens the flight case, and the cat jumps on him.
Yeah, duh.
So he jumps on him, and Sass throws the cat. The cat. Oh, for those of you that are concerned about the cat, as far as I know, maybe he's mostly uninjured at this point, and I think he went off and had a family, and he's working somewhere right now.
He's got he works in the mines, and he provides for his family,
and I think maybe he got a little disability pay from that.
He brings home the milk. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's right. His knees are a little shot, but a lot of people have bad knees.
Can't imagine a cat with bad knees.
so Sass thought it was I can't remember which one of our guys in our band it was. One of the guys that was helping him, like Kenny or something, and he was
Kenny and Sass were not even close to being.
Well, I don't remember who it was, but he punched him because he was really not happy.
You do know that a key part of telling a story is remembering the facts.
Oh, I don't remember who he punched. You have to ask Steven.
Just make it up. So, you do anyway.
All right, so Kippy was there, our drummer, and he thought it was Kippy, and Kippy's weighs like 90 pounds.
He's a twig.
And if he's wet, he weighs 95. So he's
very absorbent. Yeah.
He punched him in the stomach, and they're both rolling around on the stage right when we were supposed to be doing a follow-up meeting, about telling people what to do after the show at this church. And the church is like, what is this? And this. So the random story is when you put the cat in the flight case and he jumps out on, Sass, don't do it just before the church people come, because it'll give them the wrong impression of the show.
That story. That didn't happen.
It sure did. It did too happen.
It sure did. What are you, on a set of Happy Days?
I don't know.
It sure did. Anyway.
Hey, so
for the record, we're very pro animal on the tour.
Yep.
Rarely, if ever, do animals get injured in the making of our show. And Sass has, he was.
Yeah.
What did the rugby part have to do with it? Why is there always a beginning to the story that has nothing to do with the middle or the end?
Because I wanted to tell the audience that he was a strong dude. That was why when he punched the.
Oh, it was to set up the contrast. Like if he was if he was
weenie,
if he was kind of a weenie dude, then it'd be well, of course he freaked out when the cat jumped out of the box.
Yeah, so that was the point.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah, but I just think it's important that people know that we're always kind of animals on tour. Isn't that right? I can remember didn't we have that little chipmunk or something come by one time?
You don't get two segments. Anyway, there you have it. David's random story. We better move on because we are minutes, nay seconds away from the arrival of Scott Klusendorf. And so before he does come on, I want to mention our Steiger Impact trips that we have in 2020. For many, many months, we've come on here and say, be involved in Steiger. We are reaching and discipling the global youth culture. We are setting up city teams and urban centers all over the world. We want to have 100 of them by 2025. And then after hearing this vision, we say, now come to our Steiger Mission School. Now, this is what we want you to do. And for some of you, this is exactly what you should be doing, but it is a big commitment. It's likely you'll have to leave your country. It's a 10-week school. Many of you would have to either quit your job or get, significant time off. One of the ways that you can kind of test the waters, take a step in this direction and see what God does is through one of these Steiger Impact trips. We're doing them all over, and I'm going to quickly pull this up. But yeah, we're doing them all over. They're shorter experiences where you can really see what God's doing. You can be part of street outreach and evangelism, get a sense of our culture. If you go to steiger.org, Impact 2020, you'll see all of the trips that you can go on. We're going to Amsterdam, Kyiv. We have something to our Global Youth Summit, which is in our International Center. We're going to Poland, Pole and Rock
Which
Festival.
is in Germany.
Yeah, it's in Germany. We're going to London. There's all sorts of ways that you can come. You can experience our culture. You can be part of reaching the lost, and you can really use that time to ask God, is this something that you should be doing? So again, steiger.org/impact2020. So again,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say it will definitely change your life. So don't come if you don't want to have your life changed. I would say don't do it.
Yeah, no, but definitely will be something that will significantly encourage you. You can bring a group from your church. You can come alone, doesn't matter. Just pray about it. Check out the link and apply. So anyway, we are going to bring on Scott now.
Hello, guys.
Hey, welcoming onto the podcast, we have Scott Klusendorf. I had introduced you prior to you coming on and mentioning that your book, The Case for Life, had a big influence on me. It was really, I would say, my first exposure to the rational defense of the pro-life perspective. And obviously I'd understood there were reasons from science and rationality, but I hadn't put a lot of focus there, honestly. And I think maybe part of it was that I became a father and the topic became more relevant to me, more visceral to me. But anyway, all that to say, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and we really look forward to talking to you today.
Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, and I like the fact that
whoever's on board.
Oh yeah,
I like the fact that you have, like, is that Abraham Lincoln statue behind you?
That's Abraham Lincoln. You better believe it.
I think you're probably the first guy to have an Abraham Lincoln statue on behind us. You.
Well, what's wrong with that? It sounds like you don't have any men on your broadcast. They should all have that.
Yeah, maybe that. I was thinking the same. We do need more real men, so it's cool. Maybe this will draw them.
There you go.
We've had various paintings and art, but maybe just not sort of the Greco-Roman sort of style, which is cool. I think it brings like an authority to everything that you're about to say, I think.
Yeah, and I got Joshua Chamberlain on the picture above Lincoln. What more could you ask for?
I don't know who Joshua Chamberlain is. Who's that?
Hero at Gettysburg, saved the day for the 20th Maine in the Union.
Oh, well, there you go. Now David looks less than intelligent.
I have no idea.
Is sort of a taupe, I would say soothing, but a taupe background. David has sort of a weird lime green and kind of a triangle window. So Scott, I think you're already, you're coming out ahead in this one already. So
totally unstaged. This is my office. I didn't even think about it till you mentioned it.
So, the whole, we kind of skipped through some of the context that I would normally give in a less inauspicious beginning to a podcast, but normally we would share how this podcast is dedicated to calling followers of Jesus to be bold for their faith outside of the church. How can we wrestle with relevant topics? How can we deal with current events? How can we be winsome in sharing our faith? So it's conversations that all circle around that. And of course, I think it's a very critical subject of abortion, and how, as followers of Jesus, do we think about it? How do we discuss it? How do we engage with it? And so we have had several conversations, even fairly recently, around it. But just to kind of start this, I would, rather than maybe kind of going into the nuts and bolts of the rationality and how to sort of break down, how you would maybe convince someone of a secular perspective or a pro-choice perspective, how to think differently. One angle of this that I thought was quite interesting and I hadn't really considered was something you recently wrote in a Desiring God article. And it was the whole idea of sort of the immediatist versus the incrementalist approach to the subject. Can you kind of, first of all, explain to those who have no idea what those terms mean in this context, what that actually means, and unpack a little bit how we approach this in a less binary way that would be helpful for any follower of Jesus?
Yeah, great question. All pro-lifers, whether they are immediatist or incrementalist, believe that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being and therefore must be opposed. And they present rational, scientific, and philosophic arguments for that, arguments that can hold up in the court of public opinion. The debate within the pro-life movement is whether we should declare that abortion is immoral and must be declared illegal right now, that's the immediatist position, or whether we work within the existing legal structure to gradually reduce the legal license of abortion and increase the legal protection for unborn children. Immediatists tend to say that pro-lifers who are incrementalists are violating moral principles, that somehow they really don't want babies to be saved and therefore they're being lazy, or perhaps they want abortion to continue because they're profiting from it. Well,
Right.
That's ridiculous. That is simply not the case. Rather, like Abraham Lincoln, who we mentioned a moment ago, incrementalists look at this issue and say, we can't just wave a magic wand and make abortion go away. We're not going to find the votes to do that right now in any state in the union or at the Supreme Court or at the federal congressional level. Therefore, we're going to work to limit the evil done insofar as possible given current political restraints. And I'm of the opinion we don't really have to choose between these two strategies. Why not pursue both of them simultaneously? William Wilberforce was committed in principle to total abolition, the immediate abolition of slavery. But practically, he was forced to work as an incrementalist because he didn't have the votes to banish it immediately. And that's what pro-lifers are doing. They're not compromising their moral principles by working incrementally. Rather, they're limiting the evil done insofar as possible, given the current political realities that have been forced upon them. That's not compromise, that's prudent thinking.
Yeah.
I don't
How
know
much-
if this is, sorry.
Well, I was just going to
Uh,
say, how much do you feel like the immediatist perspective is held by those that don't actually do anything, in the sense of they're not really in the fight and they don't recognize just how complex and how difficult it is. And so you can kind of hold this very binary perspective or oversimplistic perspective that always wrong in every case, we have to fight it completely, you can't possibly compromise. Would you say that some of that has to do with not really being in the fight and not recognizing that you've got to take any ground you can, any way that you can, and that it's a long-term view, it's a marathon, not a sprint?
Yeah, I do think they are missing a good dose of real world political reality. Now, as Christians, we live in the real world. And there are times where God works miraculously and does things way beyond what we are capable of doing. But until he does, we must each work faithfully to promote the good and limit the evil insofar as possible, given the constraints placed upon us. I would like abortion to be immediately gone right now. And if I could push a button and make it happen, I would. So would every other pro-lifer. But while we wait for that day where all humans are protected, we're going to save as many lives as we can in the current moment. And I think the Lord will honor us for that. I do think that abolitionists and immediatists have good hearts. I'm not challenging that. I'm not questioning their character in that regard, but I do think they are mistaken about the political realities confronting us.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is similar or not, but we started our whole work in Amsterdam, and the reason I say that is because and that's where Ben was born. But Amsterdam, during World War II, a lot of Dutch people hid the Jews so they wouldn't be killed.
Yeah.
And so they did what they could to save who they could save. And is this a similar idea, what you're saying, than what they did?
It's similar. Obviously, the parallels are not perfect, but the general moral principle is identical. And that is, when you can't save everyone, when you can't legally protect everyone, you save as many as you can while you continue working to protect all. It's not either or. It's not like I say, oh, I only want to protect some children, not all. No, what I say is I want to protect all of them, but until I can, I'm going to save as many as I can right now. And that's what the incrementalist position holds to.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation several years ago, and I think without even really having the terminology to describe it, I think I found myself as kind of the immediatist perspective arguing against the incrementalist perspective without even really recognizing that in me in a conscious way. And I think part of it was that this notion that I can maintain and strive for an ideal, even if it's a very difficult, seemingly impossible ideal, while still being realistic about the necessary steps that it's going to take to get there. And also, as you said, accounting for the potential of God doing supernatural things. And I think you see in history seismic shifts, not slow ones, but major movements. And so to try to, having, I think, grown and even being challenged by your article in my thinking even back then, how do we not delude the ideal? Like, how do we not become jaded or bitter or cynical and just say, well, it's so complex, it's so impossible, maybe compromise is the end goal. Maybe that is all that I could hope to achieve.
Well, the fact that a job is tough does not relieve us of our responsibility to do it as Christians. Preaching the gospel is tough. We live in a culture that doesn't want to be told Jesus is the only way to salvation and all other world religions are false. That is not a popular view, but that does not relieve us of our duty as Christians to proclaim biblical truth. Of course it's hard. And the truth is, as Christians, we are discipled and we are sanctified when we take on tough things that hurt us deeply, that exhaust us, that put us in a bad light in the eyes of the world and the culture around us. But in being faithful to Jesus and doing the right thing, we become more Christ-like over time. And that's the ultimate goal as a believer, is to make me a good citizen for heaven, to make you a good citizen for heaven. And that means we're going to have to take on some tough stuff. So how do we keep from being jaded? Number one, we need to remember what abortion is. If your listeners or viewers have never watched a clip depicting abortion, I encourage them to do it. It will break your heart what is going on. And we need to look at what this is full in the face and acknowledge this is the intentional killing of an innocent human being, and we need to take responsibility to deal with it. The second thing that keeps me engaged, there are millions of fellow Christians wounded by abortion where their biggest obstacle to following Jesus is a dead child in their closet. And I want them to know the truth of the gospel, that Jesus Christ came to save sinners. He will save them. He can take their sin. He bore that sin so they wouldn't have to, and they can be restored to fruitful ministry, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did on their behalf. And then the third thing that keeps me from going jaded is I look around. Everywhere we proclaim the pro-life message, every time we get in front of high school students and college students and lay out a case for the pro-life view, they respond. The problem isn't that the pro-life message has been tried and rejected. It's that it hasn't been heard in the first place. And shame on our churches and Christian institutions for keeping that message silent, because when we get past the gatekeepers and actually talk to the students, they respond. And their number one response is, thank you. We've never heard arguments like this before. This is profound. And this is why I don't lose heart. I get up every morning and I say, what can I do to promote the good and limit the evil insofar as God gives me grace to do today? That's how I stay engaged.
So you're saying that are you saying even Christian universities and schools would be gatekeepers on this issue?
Absolutely is what I'm saying. In fact, I wrote another piece at Desiring God called All We Did Is Survive, where I talk about the number one problem for the pro-life movement right now is not that our message is wrong, it's that we can't get our message into our own institutions where we have people who need to hear it. And it's a big problem. You wouldn't believe what we go through to get into Christian colleges, Christian high schools, Catholic and Protestant. It's a monumental job, but we do it because it's necessary.
So why would they resist this? Why do you think it's that way?
Well, there's two reasons. Some of our institutions have become so seeker-friendly, they're believer worthless, meaning they're so afraid of offending people that they think that if they take on a controversial issue like abortion, they're going to drive people away who would otherwise hear the gospel. What they don't realize is just the opposite is true. When you present a compelling case for a biblical worldview like the sanctity of human life, and you do it intelligently, truthfully, and graciously, people respond. They think, wait a minute, if the Christian worldview has something to say intelligent on this issue, maybe it's got something to say on other issues as well. Maybe it deserves a second hearing.
There is an element of this discussion and discussions like this one, because there are, I think, a handful of topics that are so critical that I think in a weird way, Satan will use the how often they come up as almost a deterrent, like it's a tired topic. You know, one thing we talk a lot about, because we come from an art world, is we talk about how important it is as artists, as Christian artists, to see that as a, you know, as a way to present the gospel, that God doesn't give us art just for self-indulgence or entertainment, but that it is a powerful tool to proclaim the truth, to challenge the status quo, to speak against the lies of culture. But it's in the Christian art world, this is a tired topic. And a lot of people will use sort of the, you're telling me to preach again. And it's this, do you sense that apathy and sort of the never ending nature of this discussion in a weird sort of way is a tool the enemy uses to keep this from being as forefront of a topic as it should be?
I get that Christian leaders would grow weary of the issue, and I get that they would want it to just go away. The problem is it isn't going away. We have millions of people in Christian institutions, churches, schools, high schools, colleges that have been wounded by abortion and have never gotten resolution because they're out of faith or out of fellowship with Jesus on this issue. So the issue isn't going away. I love what you just said a moment ago about artists. We absolutely need an artistic angle to this abortion issue. And I'm an apologist. I'm a guy who deals with arguments. I'm a guy who deals with presenting a convincing case for the pro-life view and integrating that with the gospel. But I would love to see what we can talk about and what we can do to bring an artistic side of this into this debate, because you're right that is a missing element.
Yeah. David, unless you got something else, and my mind's just kind of racing. So
I mean, I have a lot of different thoughts. I was watching one of your teachings online, and you were talking about you described the unborn as the invisible neighbor. And is that right? I mean, I want to make sure I'm saying that right.
I'm assuming I did. It sounds consistent with something I would say. Sure.
Okay. And so, so when you know that your invisible neighbor is being murdered, you need to respond. And then I saw you showed a video clip of abortion, different times. And so I'm watching this and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just processing out loud here. But I'm thinking, when is civil disobedience ever the response Jesus would have us do? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like if our neighbor, my next door neighbor, was literally going to be murdered, wouldn't I do something a little more drastic than have a conversation at the city hall about why he shouldn't be murdered? Would there be a case where Jesus would say, get in the driveway and don't let the guy come into the house to murder your neighbor? I'm not saying, I'm just thinking out loud now, and I don't know what to think, but I just think, I mean, how bad does it have to get before Jesus would say there's a kind of civil disobedience that needs to happen? Now, I'm not talking about being violent to the perpetrator, but I mean, standing in the way. I mean, and I know people have been criticized for blocking abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood, that kind of thing. I don't know what to think. I'm just wondering what your position on this is.
Well, there has been examples of this in the past. The pro-life movement, for example, Operation Rescue in the 1980s blockaded entrance to clinics, and their numbers grew exponentially, and they were causing major disruption to the abortion industry. But that tactic didn't last forever. Its effectiveness waned. And so pro-lifers had to adjust their tactics. Here's what I say is our guiding principle. Our guiding principle is, as pro-lifers, not that we will necessarily engage in civil disobedience, though I think that's an option. Not that we will take out people who are performing abortions, as some accuse us of being inconsistent for being unwilling to do. Rather, our objective is to take out the machinery of death so that unborn children are protected. And let me give you an example of this. In World War II, the Allies, Canadian, British, and American paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines prior to D-Day. They spoke perfect German, they looked like Germans, they smelled like Germans, and they were there to infiltrate the enemy's ranks to get the lay of the land, to lay the groundwork for the D-Day invasion that would happen a month or so later. They believed that every one of those German soldiers that they encountered once they landed behind enemy lines was evil. But they didn't just start shooting up individual Nazis. Rather, they gathered intelligence for the larger invasion that was coming. And I see that as a picture of what pro-lifers do. Our job is to provide legal protection for the most vulnerable human beings. And that means we're going to work politically and legally to get them the protection that they deserve long term.
Yeah, it's so complicated. Again, I got a couple other questions here. One thing I remember, I've been of a position politically that you have to have a holistic view of how you vote, you engage. I'm not talking about being politically active more than just voting, but your average citizen. I certainly have a deep suspicion of one particular party. I'm not one of those people that's just going to wholesale accept an entire party, because we're all flawed and we're all human. And to be honest, I don't trust someone that can't see flaws in their own political allegiances. That you should be able to find those, because ultimately our allegiance is to Jesus. But then I heard a message by Pastor Matt Chandler, who I very much respect, and he kind of made this case like, absolutely, you're a one-issue voter when it comes to abortion. Like, you are you kidding me? It's life and death. You can't just trivialize that and say, well, you got to do due diligence intellectually to all the different positions and take it as a whole. For your average person, just purely on a political level, is this a one-issue vote that you just, I can't go there. If this is not, I'm not going to put people in power that are not going to defend, or not going to take the pro-life position.
Well, suppose we had a great world leader, pick any country you want, anywhere, who had a great healthcare program. He was great on education. The transportation infrastructure was working great. He was great on the environment. He was great on college students getting jobs, but he wanted it to be legal for men to beat their wives. Would that be enough to disqualify him?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so. So we have a major political party right now in the United States. I wish it weren't this way, but we've got to be honest with where we're at. We have one major political party sworn to the proposition that an entire class of human beings can be set aside to be killed. That needs to sink into us for a moment. And I would like to know what other issue beats that one. And I can't think of one. So that doesn't mean the Republicans are always good. And it doesn't mean the Democrats are bad on every issue. But it does mean, as a matter of principle, you got one political party that is making it abundantly clear abortion is the hill they're willing to die on. And when one major political party says we can set aside an entire class of human beings to be killed, if you're a Christian, I don't know how you look at that and not have severe trepidation about moving forward with that party.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the other party is perfect, because you're right. They're all flawed, but some are worse than others. And again, I come back to the principle we started with. As Christians, given we don't live in a perfect world, given the perfect may not be immediately available to us, we have a responsibility to limit the evil and promote the good insofar as possible. And I don't see how you can do that when you're dealing with a political party that wants to kill innocent human beings. I just don't know how that fits within a Christian worldview.
But some people would say, but well, now it's both parties, but but the Republican Party was all into sending our young soldiers to these pointless geopolitical wars to kill people and to die for what? For nothing, just for geopolitical reasons. And they would say that's equally as evil,
Yeah.
And I could go on. So I just, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's abortion is genocide, and it's But I think both parties have genocide in their history and in some of their policies.
Well, let me give a distinction here that may help. And again, my purpose here is not to say the Republican Party is always
and
good.
That's not what I wanted to.
My argument.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a helpful distinction here when we look at war versus abortion. And if you look at war, it's a contingent evil, meaning it may be wrong if you don't have a just cause. For example, if you're going to war just to promote your own political agenda or to get more territory or to get free oil or something like that,
or to
clearly
make money.
you do not have a just cause.
Yeah.
Where with abortion, it's not a contingent evil, it's an intrinsic evil. It is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. A general in a just war can foresee the deaths of innocent human beings, but he does not intend them. With abortion, we both foresee the death of an innocent human being and we intend it. So I don't think war and abortion are necessarily parallel. We have to draw that distinction between a contingent evil, meaning something that may be wrong given the circumstances, but in other cases may be right, versus an intrinsic evil that is always wrong and must everywhere be opposed.
Here's an angle to this conversation I think is relevant because, you know, obviously abortion is unequivocally wrong, and I think we all agree on that. I would say that as followers of Jesus, the most important thing is someone's spiritual destiny. That's what we should be concerned with more than anything. And where this gets complicated is, let me just give you this pop example. So there was a pastor out in New York. His name's Carl Lentz, and he's Hillsong, New York. I'm sure you're familiar. He went on The View, and they asked him very point blank about abortion. And, it, you know, quite a pretty, I think, antagonistic gotcha kind of way. You know, I don't think it was very fair the way they did it. But it was kind of like, oh, this will get you. You know, it's a similar maybe to the LGBT conversation. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to put your foot in your mouth here. And his response, when I watched it over a few times, was essentially to say, look, I need to know the situation, or I don't necessarily, he basically didn't address it very specific, but what he was saying was people need to know who Jesus is. And he kind of positioned it from a perspective of, if you don't know who Jesus is, this abortion conversation is not going to hit you. From someone who's as in the trenches of the abortion issue, could you expound on that idea a little bit in terms of through the lens of evangelism? Someone who's listening to this podcast by chance, who does not follow Jesus, is that even an issue for you? Or is this purely science, purely rational, and you don't really buy that idea that kind of answer that Carl gave? He should have come out and just said abortion is evil and they need to hear the gospel.
Well, I think we can be truthful and we can be gracious. One of the great things about talking about abortion truthfully is it creates a sense of what it really is. It's bad stuff. We're talking about intentionally dismembering innocent human beings. I don't think I need to talk to people who are having abortions to make the judgment that it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. I don't need to talk to kidnappers to understand where they're coming from before I say it's wrong to abduct a child. That said, the great news of the gospel is, though abortion is a sin that is gruesome, that is evil, Jesus came to this world to save sinners. And I am one of those. You are one of those. We are all in that camp. And the beauty of the gospel is, though each of us in our own way is a rebel to God, not just by doing bad acts, but we're rebels by nature, meaning we're just bad in our constitution. Despite that, God sends Jesus to take our place and absorb the judgment we deserve. So when I talk about abortion, I always include the gospel, because I don't want to just give people the problem. I want to point them to the solution to their problem. And I think Christians can do both. It doesn't help unbelieving people to hide the truth of what Christianity says about them. Christianity says about them that there is nothing righteous about them. And it says the same thing to me. I once had a guy say to me, so what are you saying? Are you saying I'm going to hell? And my answer was, only if you're as bad as I am. Because the Bible says we have a real sin problem. But the great news of the gospel, he came to bear the punishment we deserve. So we can talk about both these things. And I think where Carl missed the boat, he relativized abortion. He said, well, I can't really say anything about it until I talk to the people doing it. That's not the biblical view. The biblical view is to be truthful but gracious, point out that this is wrong, but that Jesus came to save people who have gone the wrong way in their lives. And that's what he's about as a pastor, pointing people to Jesus. I think that would have been the better answer.
Yeah.
Don't you need to approach people on their, see, when you have this postmodern idea about yourself, there is, and Nancy Pearcey talks a lot about that in her book, Love Thy Body.
Yeah. Great
to
book.
To a postmodern person, why can't they have an abortion? Because it's not fully, doesn't have the rights of a human. Yes, it's a baby, it's a biological baby, but it's not human yet.
Yeah.
And that's why there's infanticide and things like that are coming because of this worldview.
Well, the concept of personhood has been relative.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let me finish. So if you just say to somebody, you're bad, you're a sinner, and you need to, I'm bad and I'm a sinner, and so this is, well, that might work if you're talking in a cultural church setting. But if we say that to people that we deal with who don't have any background in the church, right away, that's going to I think they first need to understand that they are not a mistake, that they themselves are important, that they're valuable. Yes, the sin issue is we talk about, but the first thing they need to understand is how valuable they are, how important they are. Jesus did not give his life for garbage. He gave his life for the most important. God sent his son to die for humans, not any other part of creation, because we're so important to him, so valuable to him. And then you explain, why did Jesus have to do this? But I think there has to be a little nuance in the conversation. I mean, if I just talk to people that we deal with at secular universities or in Europe, or I could go on and on. We can't start with, I'm a sinner and you're a sinner and this is evil. We have to start before that and talk about value, because to a secular person, if they don't understand that, then none of it makes any sense.
Well, do keep in mind that the context for my answer a moment ago was the show, The View, where Carl was asked the question directly about abortion. So he doesn't have a lot of wiggle room there. He's got to answer the question. And notice I said that abortion is evil and sinful, and people who do it are wrong, but Jesus came to save sinners. So I can't fudge on that. And he shouldn't have fudged on it either. Postmodern or not, people understand that some things are intrinsically wrong. And I think when we show the pictures of abortion, we help them understand that. We appeal to them at the intuitional level, and then we point them to the solution.
So maybe Carl could have talked about human value and how valuable we are. And because of that, but see, I don't agree. I don't think people have an intrinsic idea about human life. Like, they don't anymore. You can show them pictures of abortion, maybe in churches and in Christian universities, but if you're in a secular context and you'll show people pictures like that, they're not going to be as shocked, because to them it's not fully human yet. It doesn't.
Well, I actually disagree with you on that. And I've got 30 years experience showing these pictures in secular settings, and people do respond to them. You're correct, though, on one point. Not everyone will, but a lot do. And they say things like, we had no idea this is what abortion was. We didn't understand it. And what we're doing is changing how they feel about abortion as a predicate to changing how they think and ultimately behave on the issue. This is why if you open a history book, you're going to see pictures of bodies stacked like cordwood at Dachau and at Birkenwald and other places. It's not that the pictures are manipulating, but the pictures speak powerfully in ways that words alone cannot. And I disagree that those pictures don't work in secular settings. We see them work all the time.
Yeah, and I would, my view on it is it's the secular mindset, the postmodern mindset is not so much marked by a complete indifference to morality. It's more just, it's inconsistent. It's that
Mhm.
they're absolutely outraged morally all the time. Every time they retweet something, they're morally outraged. It's just,
Right.
then they couple that with a philosophical relativism, and they don't either care or know the inconsistency that they're living with. And so I actually agree that it's not, in terms of methodology, we, even in our context, we have a band called No Longer Music. We use music and art to present the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And we use pretty, I would say, shocking visual ways to depict that. The guy, who creates these two characters in our theater, the guy he creates ends up sexually abusing the girl. Now, we're not graphic, but it's very clear what's happening. Now, we show this because it shocks people's senses. It awakens them to the reality of sin that they know is true, even if they sort of entertain themselves to death and don't realize it. And so, again, I agree with you. I think that people need I do think we have this conscience written on our hearts, this law written on our hearts, this sense of right and wrong. And when you can humanize it, when you can awaken people from their apathy and help them to recognize that, I'd imagine it produces great fruit.
Well, if we could jump back to Carl's situation on The View just a moment, because you said something a moment ago that I think was helpful about speaking about human value. And I actually agree with what you were saying there a moment ago. What if Carl had said this? I believe that each and every human being has intrinsic value because they bear the image of God. And because I believe that, I think it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. And because abortion does that, of course I'm opposed to it. But don't think that because I'm opposed to abortion, I'm opposed to people who have sinned on that issue. Don't make that logical connection, because I'm not opposed to people. All of us are broken. We all need to be made well by the master physician. And because all human beings have intrinsic dignity, that's why I oppose abortion. Would that have been a better answer in your mind?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in it, and I wasn't, trying. If I came across too strong
You didn't.
about the whole, but
From everything
do
I've
think
heard
there
of
needs to
Scott's
be.
debates, he's not afraid of a good, strong
No,
argument.
I know you're not. I know you're not. But I just feel like there's got to be nuance in this and how we communicate. Even, how the language that we use, especially when you're talking to people who have no, in the U.S. is even though it is post-Christian, it still understands there's still a lot of Christianity still in the culture.
Mhm.
But, if you're working in Europe and places like that, where there's even less of a understanding about any kind of Christian ideas, you have to be nuanced in how you approach this, I think.
You do, but I will tell you this, as one who's done quite a bit of pro-life work in the UK and continuing to work with pro-life advocates over there, you'd be maybe surprised to hear what is garnering the most impressive response, and that is the public displays of abortion imagery. Abortion has now become an issue in the UK. It was a settled issue 5 years ago. Nobody was talking about it. Now, Anne Ferretti, the head of the abortion rights movement in the UK, is so afraid of what's happening in her country because of the success of pro-lifers that they are trying to create more restrictive bubble zones, preventing pro-lifers from getting near abortion clinics. There are attacks on free speech, and the pro-lifers who are standing up there are using imagery to convey truths that a postmodern culture would like to push aside, and the imagery breaks through all that. You talk about nuance, images do it, art does it. That's the beauty of art. Art can do what a syllogism necessarily can't always do.
And I think that's actually an unexpected commonality that we have, is that we use pretty vivid imagery to display sin and then the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And it has always been, it is adapted and evolved to fit the context and culture that we live in. But imagery, as art so often does, is the greatest way to show a story without saying it right away. And it allows, it bypasses walls in a way that words can't. And I really think that's actually a commonality. I think if I can kind of capture the heart of what I think David is after, is that a huge principle for us, and I no doubt you would agree, is we need to have a broken heart. This, even those perpetrating these horrible acts are humans that we love, that Jesus died for. And this can't just be sloganeering, and it can't just be academic. We have to have God's broken heart, even for sinners, obviously, like myself.
And exactly. And one of the ways I will engage often is with questions. Now, again, keep in mind the answer I gave to David was strictly based on how Carl responded to the question put to him. That isn't how I would necessarily start every conversation on abortion. Hey, you're a sinner, you're under the wrath of God, and you need to be saved. No, but I might start this way. Do you think each and every human being has an equal right to life? And just toss that out there as a conversation starter. If not, why not? I might say, hey, if it's wrong to hurt people because of skin color or gender, why is it okay to hurt them because they're a different size, a different level of development, or more dependent than we are? And talk the big principle before applying it to the act of abortion. Because here's one of the mistakes everybody makes. We're really not debating a surgical procedure when we talk about abortion. That's really not what's at stake here. What's at stake is this question: who counts as one of us? Does each and every human being have an equal right to life, or do only some have it? That's the real heart of this debate. And when we can ask questions like, hey, what do you think? Does each and every human being have an equal right to life? I've gone on college campuses, secular university campuses, just 2 months ago, as a matter of fact, with a mic and a film crew. And we interviewed several dozen students right there in the quad at University of Georgia in Athens. And we would ask them questions like this: hey, is moral truth real and knowable, or do we just make up moral rules? Would the Holocaust been okay if the Jews consented to it? Does each and every human being have an equal right to life? And we were amazed just watching the students struggle to formulate answers. They would say things like, well, we're for women's rights. What is a woman? Tell me what a woman is. Well, of course, in today's culture, if they say it's related to your biological sex, they get attacked by social justice warriors. So they were really struggling. But the good news was we were giving them something to think about. We were doing what my friend Greg Kokel says, putting a pebble in their shoe that will wear on them and wear on them until hopefully they have a moment where they give it some deep thought and change their mind. But I think the pro-life view can compete in the marketplace of ideas. I think our arguments are sound. And yes, we're in a postmodern culture, but I don't believe that means we can't use facts and arguments to convey truth.
No, I agree. And I just think that I think the challenge can be not necessarily for those that have not only deeply thought about this, prayed about it, spent time out in the real world, fumbling over their words, picking themselves back up, learning how to communicate it again. I think the challenge can be for people that they never interact with the secular world. They have no non-believing friends, and they just learn a few slogans, and then they go out there and they just say, if you stood before God, would your sin, and it's that kind of thing that I think David is reacting to, is that you have the decades of experience, but a lot of people maybe even being influenced by you, how would you take that first step and be sure that you care about people you're talking to, and recognize that slogans don't change hearts, that yes, our arguments are, I love the way you laid out your case. And honestly, it was very inspiring for me. I also resonate with apologetics and rational thinking, but man, I got to love these people. And I have to learn, like Jesus, how to communicate to them. He spoke of fishing and farming and sowing in seeds. He knew people. He didn't preach slogans at them. He lived with them. He hung out with them. He ate with them. And I think that's a little bit of it. Don't you think that maybe David's reacting to is that sort of, I don't know, that Christian sloganeering and not really knowing people and how to talk to them today?
Well, I think David's point is, well, go ahead, David. I'll let you.
No, I was just saying, it's something I've talked before in this podcast, but I was having a very serious conversation with someone at the University of Minnesota, and they're asking really good questions, and I was trying to listen to their questions and answer them. And some woman was overhearing our conversation and came up to us and said, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. And it's like, that is like the farthest thing from what we should be doing. And also, in terms of abortion, I'll often say, yeah, as an artist, you can write a song that's against abortion, but you can't write that song until you've cried about the issue. Until you've wept and you've go, God, cried about a woman who doesn't have feels trapped and that they have to kill their baby. if it's just an academic thing to me, if I haven't really felt emotionally touched by the issue, then it's just going to be cold truth, and it's not going to. And so that's, to me, a very important point that we have to.
Well, I think you're making a good point, David. I have seen Christians who are pro-life show up in front of clinics with abortion signs, and all they do is scream at the women going in, repent, you're going to hell for murdering your baby. Babies are murdered here. You're a murderer. That does not help our situation. Let me tell you the most important message that needs to be heard outside that clinic. The most important message, and I've got this with pretty good anecdotal data from people who do this work, the message that resonates at that clinic most powerfully is, we will help you. That's the last message she needs to hear. We will help you. And that does a better job than simply shouting slogans. And I'm with you on that. Our ministry is all about making a persuasive and yet gracious case for the pro-life view. And sometimes we'll be put in a position like Carl, where we're put on the spot with a question that we have to answer directly, and we need to be artful in how we do it. But I think we can be artful, truthful, and engaging at the same time. Yeah. We can do that and be persuasive. Not that everybody joins us on the spot, but we give them something to think about. We put that pebble in their shoe.
Yeah. And I often, to continue to draw parallels to our own world, I really reject false dichotomies that people create. Like, you either have good art or you have truth in art. And those are dichotomies. You can't have both. And I just don't accept that. Life is more complicated than that. Our faith has more tensions than that. There are more apparent paradoxes than that. And I think that Jesus was absolutely clear while loving and absolutely relevant. And those are not exclusive. Those are part of what it means to be a fully formed disciple of Jesus in the modern context outside of the church. And it's absolutely relevant to this community of ours and the world that you live in. And so, unfortunately, our time has to be over here. But Scott, I'm so grateful for you. Like I said, you sent me down a trajectory of, after reading your book, of not only looking into this more deeply. I've got your, the SLED acronym memorized. I've used it all the time. And you've been an encouragement to me, and I know many, many others, and you're in an incredibly difficult fight here. And so maybe I would love to end this way. Yeah, go ahead, David.
No, and I would say I appreciate what you're doing too, and it's great that you're dedicating your life to something so important. So it's been great talking to you.
Thank you, guys. And David, thanks for your comments too.
How could we be praying for you, Scott, as you continue on in this calling that God has given you?
Pray that we gain access to Christian high schools. That's our big thing. We love going into Catholic and Protestant high schools and giving pro-life apologetics presentations. The students haven't heard the pro-life view, and they welcome it when they do. So pray that we get favor with gatekeepers. That would be the most important thing.
Okay. David, would you mind doing that?
Lord, thank you for my brother, for his faithfulness. And I ask that you'd open doors, supernatural doors, because this is a life and death issue. So we don't have time, Lord. This is urgent. This is an urgent thing. And we know that we are praying according to your word, how you feel, because your heart breaks. And so give them supernatural favor in these institutions. I pray this next season for Scott will be the most fruitful he's ever had. You would give him more of your broken heart, more of your ability to communicate, and to, whether it's in a political arena or if it's one-on-one or at these schools or universities, Lord, I pray that the next season will be the most fruitful he's ever had. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, brothers.
All right. Well, our guest was Scott Klusendorf. He's the president of the Life Training Institute. So check that out. Google that. Maybe this is what God wants you to do. He wants you to devote your life to this. I would highly recommend checking out the Case for Life. I think it's the most concise and relevant and powerful manual for how to defend the pro-life position. So check that out. Otherwise, thank you so much, Scott, for being on.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Peace.